In this video, we're going to be creating a 3D looking dial that's more or less looking like a volume meter in Affinity Designer. And this is all vector-based artwork, and we use quite a few layer effects as well as gradients and different colors and light sources to make this look the way it does. So we'll just kind of kick things off by creating a new document that's going to be first 1200 by 1200 pixels, and we'll keep it at 72 dpi. It's going to be for screens only. So we'll go ahead and create that, and I'll save this down as 3D dial. So to start fresh, we need to give kind of a basis for the light source, and to do that, the best way is to use a gradient on our background. So I want the light source to come from the top left corner to the bottom right corner. So we're going to have a darker color down here. And I've actually queued this up to be a style in Affinity Designer, so we can actually just kind of pre-configure that. So if you downloaded this art files as a pro subscriber, you can go ahead and access this file and use this same style if you like. So there it is, set up right there. Just clicking this dial base. And what we can do is save first and then go and start making the main shape. So we'll get kind of a large circular shape going. And there's going to be a variety of circles we're going to contend with. There's going to be an outer looking one that's going to be where the dial is attached, the inner looking one where it's like the shadowy part of the dial, and then the actual dial itself. And then we have like this indicator of where the actual level would be if you were on this, but if maybe the light didn't work, something like that. We'll start by creating this outer shape and working with that. It too is going to have a gradient, so we can start with the gradient tool and just work our way from the top to the bottom here, and kind of match those up with the size of the circle. Almost want this to be a little bit bigger. We'll just kind of align that. If you don't have snapping on, go ahead and click these three things here. Kind of just sets it up to use pretty much everything to our benefit. On this shape, we're going to actually have a stroke. There isn't one by default, but there is a fill there, so we could have a black one. If we just entered 1 point right now, we'd have that. I want it to be not so dark, so we can even do a gradient if we want to. Maybe we'll toy with that just to give this a different effect. We want the gradient to go from light to dark as well, so it looks like it's backwards in our case, so I need to actually reverse this just like that. And maybe we'll even rotate this a bit because I want the light source to come to the top, from the top to the bottom here. So you'll see it's lighter here and then darker down here. Great. A cool effect I like to add to most of my shapes is noise, basically. So if you were to click on the color, the fill, and then the color of the gradient we're on, and then click on color itself, you'll see a noise meter. You can add a bit of texture to that fill. It does a lot of, I don't know, adjustments to me that make it just more realistic, and I really like that effect. I wish there were more different textures you could use as opposed to just this particular one, but beggars can't be choosers, I guess. And the stroke on the bottom is looking a little too dark, so I think I'll edit that. Great. The light source of this gradient's a bit off too, so I want it, since we rotated the main one, I want it to be back over here. So we'll go like that. Cool. So we need another shape, and this one's going to be that darker ring that was on the first part right here. It's going to go throughout that. I just messed up that one. Let me undo that. And it will come in just a bit more than the outer circle. So in fact, I think I just skewed that a bit. So if you just scale this without using your shift key, it's going to kind of do some things you don't like. So we'll center that. And this one's going to have a dark fill, like I said. So we can actually probably get rid of the stroke for now and go back to the fill. Maintain that light source, so we want this edge to be lighter but still a darker color, and then this one to be the darker of the two. So we kind of start with that, And it's got the noise too, which is great, since we've basically copied the shape in front of it. And then if you want to make sure these are centered completely, you can click both. I'll have my layer selected here and go up to, where is our align, and then go center, and then align middle. And they should be perfectly aligned. So we need one more effect. This one's going to be inside, just inside this darker one. There we go. And then what's cool about this dial is it's using a built-in preset, style preset from Affinity Designer. So there's one called Metal I really like, and I think I'm going to roll with it. The only thing I did maybe change is rotate it so that light kind of goes in a different direction. The first one might be a little different. It's going in this direction, and this one's going in this direction. So we could even mimic that one too if we want, just to kind of go like that. I would say it's up to you in the end. Probably make it a little smaller. And we could do the align thing again. So if you select all those circles, I call them circles, they're ellipses, whatever you want to call those. And we'll align those. Great. To make more of an effect, more of a 3D effect, shadow is pretty important at this stage. So this particular dial is going to have an outer shadow. It's going to be a fairly large one too. So we can go to maybe just a black and kind of get something rolling here to see what looks good. And we need the angle to be all the way down to 270. And I'm more or less going to go as pretty high opacity, maybe 90%, just so we could still see the bottom. I would leave the intensity alone, but offset and radius should be pretty dang high. And you can go to normal or multiply, kind of the same in this case. So I think that's good for that. And already everything's taking shape, so it's looking pretty good. So up next, we need to make that light indication around the whole shape itself. And we can even go as far as making the shape itself a little smaller. And while I'm at it, I want to add a bit of effects to this one that are just very subtle. There's an inner shadow thing I like to do where you enhance that, but you only use a light color instead of a dark color, and make sure it's on normal all the way up in opacity, and then set your intensity pretty high. And if you increase the radius, you'll see what it's doing. But we want the offset and intensity to be pretty high, I think. I want it to have kind of just a really tight edge that's a lighter color, if that makes sense. So see if I can make that happen here. This might be on the wrong angle, that's why. So offset's a little too much, but right about there is what I'm after. So it almost looks like it adds a stroke to the dial, but it doesn't in this case. It's just kind of the outside edge. And we can even come back with the intensity some. The radius here needs to be pretty much all the way down. You want it to be a hard looking edge. And then I guess our opacity can come down a tad too. So like 85% maybe. We'll scale that with the object. So it adds that little slight incave to that dial. So say that's resting on stereo or something. That's kind of where it's recessed. And you could do the same with another shadow on the top portion if you want. You can do an inner glow maybe to mimic that. So this kind of is doing the opposite in this case. So it's going to go from all the edges. You could do it from center too, but I actually think I'll leave that alone. So I think that's looking okay. I think we'll roll with that. And I might add a bit more noise to the darker layer because it needs to be seen easier. The darker the color, the harder it is to see, I think. Okay, so let's add the next part, which is the light indication, which actually ends up being a type on path. So to do this, you actually need to draw another circle. That's going to be about the size of, well, the best probably route to do it is duplicate this one. I'm going to hold Option, click, and that duplicates it when I drag. And then I'll just scale this one up and put it all the way in the back. I'm going to change this color to just be something obnoxious because I don't really need the fill. So maybe we'll just do like a green as a guide. Make sure it's centered and kind of give it some space because we're going to be typing on the path instead of anything in the middle. And to do this, we need a fairly large font. So if you hit your type tool, which is T on your keyboard, and you see this indicator where it's like a squiggly line with the T as you hover over the shape, that means you could type on that path. So if you click that, we can go ahead and start typing. And you'll see these two handles appear. One's green and one's red. That's basically saying this is where it starts and then this is where it ends. So we want to start and end in specific areas. And it might take some refinement to get right, but this is kind of the approach I took to get this effect. And then I have Arial rounded on my system. You might have something similar. I would look for something similar if you could. And set the font size, I would say like 124 or something like that. And just type hyphens all the way around. So you go as far as you can. It's going to follow that path. And we may have to adjust the size here. It's just kind of looking kind of big. Go back and highlight that text and go even bigger, maybe 200. You'll start to see what I'm going for here. It keeps going around in circles as you go, so you can refine that and hit backspace to make those shapes go away. With the start and finish portion is kind of key here. So it kind of makes it align the way you like. So one thing we can do, I'll probably even increase this more. I want those to be fairly decent size. We can definitely decrease the size of the shape a bit and then align it better to our other shapes that we created. Possibly even just go up against that shape. See how it's all aligned right there at the yellow? That's what we're after. And then we can do some type effects in our character palette to adjust this a bit and add some tracking. Definitely want to add quite a bit. So all the positive tracking, maybe 30%. Yeah, like that. And we can even maybe decrease and increase the amount of segments we have here. Cool. So as is, it's kind of hard to work with this. We need to have like half of these be that green shade in the first one, as you saw, and then half be the black. So what we can do is more or less separate concerns. So I might even decrease this a bit. It's a little tighter. Something like that I think works. We need to convert this text to curves to really work with it the way I intend to. So I'm going to actually duplicate it just for grins, just to have a backup. And the one above that I'm putting above right now will convert to curves. So you can do that. On my system, it's this more arrow because I'm on my laptop. So go ahead and convert to curves. And now it's all a bunch of shapes. So what we want to do is group certain shapes to be a certain group because some are going to be that lighter color, the green or whatever you want to pick, and then others aren't. So probably just group these and like take them out of the main group here. And then we have left over is our darker group. So the darker group's going to be kind of just a grayer tone. Looks like there's one too many there. There we go. Oh. There. So that's all of these on the right. And they have layer effects on them. and their inner shadows at this moment, which we can probably keep. So I'm going to actually change just their fills for now to be possibly kind of this grayer color. Before I do that though, I'm going to create one solid shape out of all of them. So now we have this solid curve shape, and I'll probably get rid of this inner shadow bit because it's kind of causing conflicts. So then we have, let's say, the right side, just to give it a name. And I'll go ahead and do it the same to this group. You have to select all the layers in it, so be sure to do that and not just the group. And then we'll do this, and again, get rid of the effects. So that's going to end up being our left group, which will be the colors we'll use. Okay, so let's adjust first the colors of the grayer side, so we can maybe just do a dark gray, something to that effect. And then this we'll do the same. I want to add kind of a gradient effect on this one. So since it's one shape, it's going to apply to each of the shapes. We can kind of deal with that in separate ways, but I think what I'll do is just run with it on using the gradient tool. And I need to edit this gradient now. And up to you what color you want to use. I use green to begin with because that's just typically what I would assume I'd see on something like this. But you can use, of course, anything, even multiple colors. And just experiment here. Neon green's a little much in my opinion, so you can even add noise to these just to give them more of an effect too. So that's kind of neat. So something like that, just to give an inclination that it's growing, but it's also darker at the bottom over here. And then on these, we can apply effects to give them some depth. So I'll hit this effects button again. We can do maybe a little shadow just to kind of intensify what we're working with. There's the offset. We want the offset to probably be on this side because the light's coming from the top left. So we'll roll with that, kind of just decrease how dark this is. Maybe decrease the intensity, something like that. So I think I have an outer shadow and this one's got an inner shadow. So maybe we'll go that route because it wouldn't make sense. It might make sense that that's off the surface. In fact, I think that would make more sense than being recessed. So let's roll with that. Nah, you know what? I'll say the other way. So instead of outer shadow, we'll do inner shadow. But we want to change this to dark color and definitely decrease the offset and increase the radius a bit. Intensity can go down, and then we'll see how it looks. Something like that. It's just kind of got that effect going. And I think our angle needs to be backwards. So 315. Yeah, so it's a little recessed is what we're after. We can copy that effect. And I'll hit Command C on my keyboard. And then if you select this one, you can go ahead and hit Edit, Paste Effects. So you can only paste the effects. So we've got that now on our darker ones here. Maybe decrease the size of everything, align it a bit. One last thing I forgot to do is add our little indicator on the actual dial. This one's just going to be another circle. And we can just kind of give it a gradient as well. We'll just toy with this. I'm going to make this a radial gradient and then invert it. And we'll move this around so it looks right. Colors are obviously off, so we want those to kind of match what we have up here in the darker zone. And then we can toy with our radius of making like one side offset so it doesn't look like it's just a perfect circle. So something like that I think would work well. Or if you wanted to take this approach and not use a gradient, you could just fill it with a dark shade and then go the same route with the effects we were using and do an inner shadow. And then increase that radius, offset, and multiply is going to have to be pretty far up. Yeah, there we go. So you see that coming through on there. Looks a little recessed. And then the outer shadow could be, if you want to go that route, go and add white, and then we'll do the same but make sure you have, like, say, normal for the blend mode. The radius should be all the way down. The offset could be pretty high, and the intensity as well. This super subtle effect, but you can see it right there, that little white. I'm just adding it to the outer rim just to kind of give it a little flare. And that would align with where this dial is set, so that's something you can think about. So that, you guys, is how you create a 3D dial in Affinity Designer. We were using quite a bit of effects to get this to work. Drop shadows and all this stuff, gradients, the different groupings of shapes and curves. And of course, all that noise texture is really making this enhanced and looking sharp. So hopefully you followed along and found that useful. If you have any other ideas for UI or stuff like this that you would like to see, feel free to let me know in the comments. If you're following along as well as a pro subscriber and have these files, or just want to duplicate what I did, and you aren't a pro subscriber, feel free to share your work below in the comments. Look forward to seeing it. Thanks for watching.